There are a ton of scandals that are currently rocking the Democratic Party, and it's kind of distracting them from the Trump administration dismantling the DSA brick by brick by brick. And it's not going to, shirk or fall apart. There are very few Democrats who are trying to stand in the breach at the moment, saying, they don't want anything to do with socialism. Americans don't want anything to do with socialism. You have some media personalities like Stephen A. Smith doing this, but he's one of very, very few.
This fascist lie.
Nice try, Stephen Smith.
We damn sure don't want to be a socialist nation. This ain't Denmark. This ain't Finland. This ain't Sweden. This is the United States of America. You roll over to these borders with the vision and the fantasy and the passion that, here, I can achieve anything.
Some things in life are guaranteed, like death and taxes and Stephen A. Smith yelling. I don't even know why the man has a microphone. You probably heard him when he did this broadcast. He's not wrong here, by the way.
I ain't trying to be like everybody else. I'm trying to be one-on-one. That's what this is about in America.
The issue, though, as you heard, is that Stephen A. Smith is saying, we're not the Baltics, we're not Sweden. The socialist class does not just want to be Sweden and the Baltics. Bernie Sanders ran that, or not the Scandinavian countries. Bernie Sanders ran that argument back in the aughts. He doesn't use it anymore. They openly say that the United States needs to be like China. They're very, very clear about it. And all of the other Democrats in the party, all of those other Democrats in the entire party are sort of falling in line. So Nancy Pelosi initially came out and said, well, someday these kids are going to fall in line. There was a clip of her earlier this week saying that someday she thought the socialists, yeah, sure, they're crazy now, but someday they're going to realize that maybe they were just being a little bit too much there. Someday they're just a smidge overboard. Well, Pelosi's kind of trying to push back now. Nobody really believes her. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is just going head first into it because she really wants to run for president in 28. And so here she goes again on the abolition of the U.S. Senate, just tearing the country down brick by brick. Here you go.
Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez pressed on one of the many controversial goals of the DSA as the far-right fringe rides high off recent primary victories. Roll it.
The DSA co-chair suggested that part of the platform may be abolishing the Senate. What are your views there?
I mean, again, I'm not running for any larger office presently.
She's running for re-election because, again, the term for Congress people in the House is every 2 years.
That is, of course, a constitutional question, and I think that's a constitutional question.
You support the Senate, right, though?
Pardon?
You support the institution of the Senate itself, right, as part of the Constitution?
We've all got our complaints. I don't support the filibuster. I don't support elements of this institution that we know, were founded on Jim Crow.
Yeah, no. Now, the scandals are much worse. Much worse in the meantime. Radio crew, welcome back from the commercial break. We do have a couple of pretty significant scandals that we need to discuss. So first of all, the generic congressional ballot numbers. Again, I know the polling isn't the biggest scandal ever. Not only are Democrats in a very rough spot, where there are members of the Democratic National Committee who are being asked to sign non-disclosure agreements by senior DNC officials because the DNC is out of money. Democrats at the top level. Now, individual campaigns people are donating to, like James Tallarico, who we're going to get to in a second. He's getting lots of money in donations, but people aren't donating to the DNC to then distribute funding. And that's causing a whole lot of problems. First of all, black Democrats are not getting any money at all. And I mean no money. There are Politico articles talking about how the Democrats have stopped spending on black candidates across the entire southern United States. Because after they lost the Supreme Court battle, Democrats just went whole hog with Islamists and the Marxists. And so no money is being spent. Also because the Democrats have no money to spend. They have none. They have nothing. They are in significant debt. But in order to keep from the embarrassment on that, there are now reports, and I talked to a friend of mine in the DNC today and said there have been some internal conversations about people signing non-disclosure agreements at the request of senior members of the party so that they don't tell the media by threat of lawsuit that the party is in significant debt. Yeah, I don't know if that's under the purview of the Federal Election Commission or if that's under the purview of the Internal Revenue Service or just the Department of Justice in general. But yeah, I just don't think that you can do that. Now, there are a significant number of scandals. I told you about this. So Mamdani, again, who they threw all of their cards on, he is turning out to be a complete loon, toxic to the rest of the country. And, you know, in a couple of ways. So, of course, he showed up to Rikers, which he's trying to shut down, to just sit down and, you know, watch soccer with the prisoners, because he's made this clear. He hates the police, and he has called for a lot of individuals to be released from prison and says that prisons in general and jails should just be abolished. So here he is,
there was a match happening, and we talked about
making time to go sit back and, you know, watch some soccer with a bunch of actual violent prisoners, those who have been accused and convicted by juries in New York of extremely violent and horrific crimes. Otherwise, as Mamdani calls them, my people.
I hope that this shares with people who are incarcerated here on Rikers that they too are a part of New York City.
Oh, they too are a part of New York City. Ah, it's an inclusive thing. Don't you feel like, well, it's inclusive? You know, just like how he says that anyone who is illegal in the United States, well, you're a New Yorker, you're here as a member of New York. Well, if you're in prison, that makes you just still as much of a New Yorker, despite the fact, as you know, that if you are convicted of a felony, you do lose certain rights, like the right to vote, the right to carry firearms, because you have forfeited those rights by taking the rights of someone else. But he's also associating with the wildest and the weirdest. Again, you remember he tried to get out there and freeze the rents. And amid all of the millionaires and people who have money fleeing New York City in droves, he started hosting these grievance sessions where you have nutcases all dressed up in masks and what appear to be a maxi pad, maybe, also strapped to her face and neck, suggesting that eviction, like if you don't pay your rent, is violence. So here's the Mamdani's crew.
Our city is turning the corner on tenant power. When we organize, we win results. The Mamdani administration is emboldening us so that we no longer tolerate the violence of evictions as a matter of business as usual.
Oh boy.
My landlord owns dozens of buildings.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing because he paid for them.
But he is not a steward of the public trust. In fact, it is the opposite.
But you chose to enter into an agreement, a contract, to rent from, again, explaining things to brick walls in that case, I'm sure. Now, the downstream effect of this, by the way, is that the public support for the Democratic side of the aisle on the Socialist front has evaporated. It has evaporated. So numerous polls showing like up to 3/4 of the American people polled, registered and likely voters, are completely against the Democratic aims, which so far on the Socialist side are just offering free healthcare. Now you have to also accept all of this insane violence and horrible policy, but we promise we'll totally give you really great healthcare. Of course, it fails every time that it's tried, and in Canada is basically just a way to tell the young and the old to commit suicide, but trust us, it's going to be really great. Then when you actually look at the polling data here, what we're finding is that all the way from Arizona over to Maine, Republicans are gaining ground in polling despite doing pretty much nothing. And that's just on the Socialist side. Now on the corporate Democrat side, on like the technocracy, kind of the older establishment crew, they're also having a really rough time. So in total fundraising down in Georgia, the Republican candidate Jackson has so far raised $113 million. The Democrat candidate, Bottoms, has raised $3 million. So Jackson is currently up by $110 million in this race. Now you say, hang on, wait a minute. Isn't James Tallarico raising far more than Ken Paxton in Texas? Yes, he is. But again, with a little asterisk there, and we will get to that. Now, moving over from Georgia, before we hit Arizona and Ruben Gallego and some fun new scandals over there, Tim Walz up in Minnesota is being asked to stay away from any candidates in the election because he's now upset that Marco Rubio and the State Department, as well as the Department of Homeland Security under Mark Wayne Mullen, deported an illegal immigrant who just so happens to have been convicted of abusing children sexually, that Tim Walz then pardoned so that the guy, Mr. Van, wouldn't be deported. So again, here was Tim Walz explaining on the pardon board, of which he is a member, that he didn't want him to be deported because deporting a convicted sex offender would not make anyone safer.
Vang's case, I would state this, that I can find no reason how Minnesota will be safer or better if Mr. Vang is deported to a country he has not been to since he was a child.
I mean, yeah, you know, certainly there's no reason to suspect that someone who has committed an offense once would commit the offense again. Isn't that right? Fraud cases in the state of Minnesota.
Fox 9 reports.
So, you know, from that point forward, the United States then grabbed him and then deported him. So bewilderingly, and I mean bewildering, there's no reason. Walz gets out in front of the cameras again and is like, you know who's the real victim here? The sex offender. Yeah, that's right. Man, the midterm decisions are just insane.